Hey guys, keep coding if you're coding. I don't want you to like get distracted by this stuff because you're probably already aware of some of the tools. So I'm gonna try to make it fun for those of you that already know, this stuff. But otherwise, I'm just gonna like try to show some of the new stuff and some of the old stuff in case you don't know about it. So oh no, here we go. Okay, cool. In general, our mission is to use and develop the Cosmos as if it were one chain, unified user and developer experience. We have a lot of work to go before we get there, but that's generally the plan and our mission. The way we want to do that is with modularity and metaprogramming. A lot of that has to do with code gen and our kind of suite of tools. We really try to do like one thing well and make everything interoperable instead of some like monolithic thing that does a whole bunch of stuff. Really small interdependent packages and modules. I'll go through some of these products. Generally, factory for apps, composing app chains and functionality, generating these multi-chain client packages. That's generally what we do. And then we have a couple other packages and modules. So Telescope, you're probably aware of this. I'm not going to bore you guys too much because you've probably already heard of it. But you can convert your SDK chains into TypeScript. And what it does is it will generate all the types for you. If you don't know about this one, you should definitely check it out. We automate all the Mino encoders and all the nitty-gritty details of the using Cosm.js and everything and make it really simple. So definitely check that out. TS CodeGen, you're probably aware. If not, definitely check it out, especially since this is a Cosm Hackathon. This will save you a bunch of time. And if you already use this, there is a few new things that you should know that I'll show you in here, new features. Let's see here. Okay, so generates types. Again, you guys have probably already seen this before, so this is not anything new necessarily. Contract clients, this is great. So effectively, you get all the auto-completion in your IDE because we generate the TypeScript for the client, all the queries, all the execution methods, the responses as well. So it makes it very easy if you're in your IDE and use TypeScript to interact with your contracts. You may or may not know we have a React query integration, so it goes through all the queries and can generate all of your state management. This is kind of something that we really want to focus on is like, the big idea is like getting from idea to execution. It's like, you want to go from like LA to San Francisco, you think it's a straight line, but like all of a sudden you decide to like take the PCH and drive along the ocean, and if you zoom in the level of detail, instead of doing the straight line, you do all these like tiny little turns and squiggles, and before you know it, this 5-hour thing turns into like this 8-hour point is that like software is the same way where like you have this idea, you want to build something, and then like you get lost in the details. Before you know it, you're not even focusing on your idea, you're kind of like getting into like the implementation details, the mechanisms that are like rendering everything, or anyhow. So we want to minimize as much of that as possible, all the way to even automating your state management. That's what this React query integration is for. The new thing I want you to know about today, if any of you guys have already been using TS CodeGen for the last year or so, or 6 months, this is probably the coolest new feature that we actually just shipped last night. This will save you a ton of time, and some of you might even get frustrated right now because you're like, damn it, I did this in like our own way, and it's frustrating because now we actually have something for it. But there's a use contracts hook. Now you can generate in TS CodeGen, and then literally you can just get the signing client and start doing transactions. And as you can see here, there is no RPC URL. There is no Cosm-Wasm client or signing Cosm-Wasm client. We kind of abstract all that away for you. And you don't have to then take the generated TS CodeGen client and instantiate it and pass in these clients or whatnot. You just pass in the address. I'll show you how it kind of works under the hood in a second. But again, you can also do this for message composers and React Query and all the other nice plugins that we have. But essentially what we do is under the hood, we do a new CodeGen where we create a class that extends a base class, and we automatically instantiate all of your TS CodeGen clients with the Cosm-Wasm client, the signing Cosm-Wasm client, the address of the contract. And we basically create this like hash. we purposely decided to just do all the contracts. We thought of making a provider for each contract. We thought that might be too much overhead. We might end up making a configuration to let developers choose how they want to do it. But there is a part of the code I'm not showing here. You can check out the implementation where we generate then like a, I don't know if it's like use effect or something, but it goes in and the interface is you pass in the address and a promise to a client and a promise to a signing HackWasm client. This is the exact same interface that you get back from the use chain hook in Cosmos Kit. So if you use Cosmos Kit and you call use chain, it gives you the promise to the client and the promise to the signing HackWasm client. If you don't use Cosmos Kit, that's okay. Just give a promise and get the client however you want. So that's how we achieve the ability of like writing super simple code. You don't have to deal with RPC URLs. You don't have to deal with clients. Basically, if you use Cosmos Kit and this new TS code gen contracts hook, you just start writing code and making transactions. You don't deal with any of the boilerplate. So really excited about that one. Okay, chain registry. You guys probably know about this. Asset list, chain information. The coolest new thing is our new chain registry client. We did have a chain fetcher before, but it was a little bit manual because you had to put in the entire URL of like whatever registry you were fetching it from. And so now we make a really nice API for this. You just pass an array of the chain names. And if you want to get more specific about which IBC connections and which asset lists you want, you can actually pass those properties in. I'm just showing like the easy mode where you just pass in the chain names and it basically copies that list to the assets in IBC and then it calculates everything. When you have to call fetch URLs and get generated asset lists, and please give us feedback if you think we can make better method names. But in this case, this would then, based off these chains, it would get all the IBC information, all the assets, copy them all over to Osmosis and calculate all those, crazy little IBC denominations and update all the aliases to whether it's a CW20 or native asset, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the bull market, this type of thing will be more important. Right now, everyone just using chain registry and NPM installing it, it works fine. But eventually, we probably want to just have like dynamic asset lists. So I want to move everyone more towards using this. We'll probably make some examples with Cosmos Kit, so it's a little bit more asynchronous. Maybe there's some kind of like worker in the background that can like refetch periodically and keep things update and sync. So definitely, I would check that one out. Probably are already using Cosmos Kit. There are some pretty big updates that we're really excited about. If you don't know Cosmos Kit, one interface, many wallets. It's basically a unified wallet adapter. So we have, I think, 15 plus wallets now that we're supporting, including some really great ones I'll talk about in a second. But essentially, while you don't have to use the modal, you can. And it lets you just pick a wallet. Either you're connecting on mobile or extension, and then you're connected. Pretty simple. You can also use the core. So if you want to make your own UI, don't feel the need to use ours. You can totally use whatever one you want. Osmosis is now using Cosmos Kit, and we have a lot of great partnerships like Ledger and Wallet Connect. So we have like 30 plus contributors from like all sorts of great teams. But the new Cosmos Kit 2.0 is what I'm really excited about. There's no Chakra UI. We heard your guys' feedback. We know a lot of you guys were like, this uses Chakra, or this uses React, and we use Vue, or this and that and the other thing. So we're like, okay, like how do we manage that? Like how do we, because we were trying to like move quick, and we thought Chakra was like a nice UI kit that people could build on, but it's too opinionated to like pick a UI framework. So anyhow, we removed it. We have a smaller bundle size. We also have Ledger support. The bundle size is like 1/6 of the current one. I think like just removing Chakra itself was like 3 megabytes, some crazy number. The actual Cosmos Kit React is like, as you can tell, it's like 30 kilobytes. It's like really, really small. Ledger support, native USB Ledger support. It's already in the beta branch, working, tested, functional. I have to double check if we've published it. We're like in the midst of merging beta into main. Could be, I'll check right after this talk, but like by the end of this hackathon, we should have it. If not, maybe in the next couple hours. And so really excited about this native ledger integration. The other thing I'll talk about in a second is that the UI is now rendered with a thing called interchain UI. I'll talk about that in a second, because you guys know we do a lot of UI stuff, and if you're ever wondering where to start and you do like to have some kind of boilerplate, check out Create Cosmos app. You can install it globally like this, and then just run the CCA or Create Cosmos app command, and then quickly generate these like scaffolds that have the UI, documentation, chain selectors, some basic theming, and the ability to connect your wallet. A lot of you guys have probably already used this before, but if you have, and you want to see some of our new templates, I'm about to show you that. And if you haven't, well, here we got some cool templates for you. So if you want to make a staking dashboard, we've got literally in seconds a way to just install fully functional, delegate, undelegate, redelegate, listing your validators, claiming, all this stuff is baked in, fully functional. We've also got a swap tokens UI example for Create Cosmos app. This one uses Osmo.js. We've also got the LPing. We've also got asset lists, IBC transfers. So the idea here is like, if you're, I think like validators kind of appreciate this kind of thing because like they just want to focus more on like back-end stuff. They don't want to do the UI. And so the idea here is like, hey, let's just give them this like fully functioning thing that's like ready to go, and then you can kind of tweak it and mix and combine these. One I'm really excited about for NFT creators is the NFT template, because it just gives you this like little mini NFT website. So, if you're a collection, let's say like Bad Kids, right? Like, it's cool that you can be on the Stargaze Zone marketplace, right? But like, what if you can't get like in the top of that? Or how do you, I don't know, like how do you get traffic there? Or how do you get to drive your own users and know that they're not going to get lost in some other collection, right? If you want to post on Twitter like, hey, here's my new NFT collection, and then they go to the marketplace and they start scrolling around and they just forgot about yours, right? Versus you could have like badkids.com and they just mint the bad kid right on your website. They're not getting distracted with other projects. And if you look at Ethereum, a lot of the NFT projects have their own minting websites. So literally in 3 seconds, you can make your own website, fully themable and customizable in terms of styles. Mint, sell, transfer, burn NFTs, all the functionality. And we tried to make this example pretty easy to install. So definitely check that one out. Another thing you guys should be looking into is, first of all, I would ask yourself, like, is the first thing you're doing writing a test? Because if it's not, you should really ask yourself why. When I was a developer in my 20s, I used to tell people, wow, it's like a tautology. Why would I write a test? If it's true, of course it's true. Like, it doesn't make sense. Testing did not make sense to me at all. And it wasn't until we made some changes, and I think we got a call from Janet Jackson's agency or someone, because we were powering janetjackson.com, and some CSS thing changed, and like we were also powering New York Fashion Week and some stuff for General Electric and Wells Fargo. And so we had all these like big enterprise companies, and we were just kind of like deploying changes all the time and not realizing what it was changing. And so we had to put all this testing in place to like figure out like, is our code fixing this one thing, like whack-a-mole updating this other thing or not? And I really internalized the importance of testing. And then I actually ended up like, in this like really painful masochistic way during the pandemic, building a Postgres framework. And there's like no tooling for Postgres really in the world. So I had to kind of wield into existence my own Postgres. But I will say I probably 10 to 100x my ability to write code by starting with a test and building a testing environment where when I edit the code, I immediately get feedback about, is it passing? Is it running? Because otherwise, especially if you guys are doing anything in the front end, you're probably like updating your code. You're like navigating some UI thing. After you refresh the page, that might take one or 2 seconds. Then you're navigating to the thing, clicking on some button, running a transaction. That will like aggregate into like the largest amount of developer fatigue ever over time, versus if you have a little test that runs within like a millisecond of you editing the code because there's a Babel watcher, and it just runs the test instantaneously. Now within like 1 or 2 seconds, you're getting the feedback that was previously taking 8 seconds and clicking on a UI. So definitely look into writing tests. Starship is our solution for this, and this actually was a inspiration at Cosmoverse with Anmol and Simon and Ethan, and the idea was that we were like, hey, like Simon and Ethan, like, how are you guys testing Cosm.js and HackWasm? And there's a bunch of code, but it was kind of like in and throughout and weaved in around places. We're like, how do we kind of like pull this out and turn it into like this product? So Anmol did this amazing job of pulling this stuff out and putting it into like a really nicely, neatly packaged Helm chart and Kubernetes system to spin up multiple chains for testing and simulation. So check out starship.cosmology.tech. Essentially, our goal is to create a test-driven development philosophy. For me, it's like much more important than the product itself, is that we want to make it so easy for you to write tests that you don't have to think about it. Because I'm telling you right now, like, I 10 to 100x my Postgres development once I started using this testing framework that I had built a long time ago. And I feel like, maybe Starship has a ways to go, but that's the kind of experience we want to get to. And I would encourage you guys to check out Brett Victor's talk on inventing on principle and getting feedback from the code changes that you're writing. This is the type of dev experience I think we need in order to actually write software, get feedback from it, iterate, and actually write more advanced code. So essentially, it comes with an explorer, comes with a chain registry, simulating all the blockchains, all the IBC relayers and validators, and we have multiple clients. For me, the whole purpose, I'm really interested in TypeScript. You guys might be interested in Rust or Go, but it's very simple. You have a couple chains or many chains, and you just add to the configuration. It will spin them up. The most exciting thing for me is that if you notice here, this syntax looks a lot like Cosmos Kit and Telescope, because it basically is. And the vision is that you can write isomorphic code that literally looks just like the code you're going to write in your application now. So instead of being in some React application, like I mentioned earlier, where you're spending 2 seconds waiting for the refresh, clicking around a UI, and clicking on a thing, working on a dev net or a test net or even production, literally you're running this code in milliseconds that is the same code you can copy paste into your app, right? So the beauty is with Starship, the whole reason we built it and didn't use some of the other existing tools, which we definitely deeply researched, is because we wanted to have this feature of being able to write code that looks just like the code you're writing in your actual applications. And I think there's a couple other things, but we are using it in production. It's being used for Osmo.js right now, testing all the amino encoders, creating pools, swapping tokens. So every time we do an upgrade, we know if things work or don't work. I don't have to manually test anything against production now. So I can actually basically update the aminos, basically just run Telescope, update the protobuffers, and then I just let the CI/CD do everything. So we also figured out a way to run a small Kubernetes cluster inside of GitHub Actions. So if you guys want to automate your CI/CD process and run all of your tests when you push new branches, it already works. So this runs in GitHub Actions. If you have less than 3 chains, it will run in GitHub Actions. If you have more than that, I think you need to spin up your own cluster because it's just too much memory for GitHub. In general, the idea here, like I said, is to minimize the gap between idea and execution, because you don't want to get that developer fatigue where when you're editing code, how much time does it take you to get to the point where you realize if your code worked? You should pay attention to that. And literally, one thing you should really do is just take a pause and be like, okay, how can I minimize that? Maybe you need to write a small script for yourself. Maybe it's not a testing thing, maybe it's something else, but just how do you automate your processes in your development flow? And again, tools for contracts. Well, as you know, we got the CW script. This is like a simple and expressive language that compiles to Rust. And I really like it because, as someone who's building tooling for HackWasm, I'm not necessarily a Rust developer, but I always did kind of find that it was kind of hard to figure out where things were, because it was so general purpose and kind of widespread everywhere. And there's enums and for execute and for queries, And I like this because I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, wow, this looks like almost like a TypeScript class with some kind of like, decorators or something. You got the state and the instantiate and the executes and the queries. It's just very simple. The idea here is I think that, over time we want to make it easier for people to look at a contract and understand it, and also have the confidence to be able to write one for the first time. The goal for CW Script, right now it's its own DSL, but we want to move it to a place where we can kind of adopt more popular, well-known languages, and this is sort of like the model for how to just organize the contract better without having to have all these, macros and like really kind of hardcore Rust things that you guys probably love, but you got to remember there's like millions and millions of TypeScript developers in the world, and I don't know how many Rust developers there are, and I don't know how many CW Script developers there are, but like it definitely, the number gets smaller as we go to these like more, domain-specific languages and DSLs. So my goal is to kind of open this up and really kind of go, the way I think of choosing a language is not a technical problem. It's like a people problem. And you want to think about like your CTO brain is like, how many people can I hire in this dev pool, right? So that's kind of where we want to go. Eventually, we're going to take this to like more wider audiences. But we're starting here to just kind of start organizing how do we compile the CosmWasm in the best possible way and expose all these functionalities and organize it to really package up that contract creation process. And then we're going to open it up to wider audiences with more popular languages. CW Simulate, you can explore, test, and time travel through your CosmWasm contracts. If you guys have ever tried to use a debugger with CosmWasm, you might find that like dealing with bytes in a blockchain is really hard. So what's really great about CW Simulate is it uses CosmWasm VM.js to run CosmWasm inside of the browser, and it uses the Chrome debugger to step through the Rust code. And so it's really awesome. No change required because it simulates everything, and you can actually step through your code, and also sub messages, which like this is where it gets a little bit out of my wheelhouse, and you should talk to William. But apparently it's really hard normally to debug messages and sub messages, and it sounds like you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm just kind of repeating what I've heard from William, but I would check this out. Seems like a super useful tool. It's powered by this CosmWasm VM.js, and it could be a really cool debugger if you guys like haven't yet like figured out like certain issues that are going on in your contract. I know debuggers can be super helpful. Definitely better than console log. I don't know what the console log is for Rust, but if you can do a debugger, it's probably going to be a lot more helpful. So check that one out. Yeah, that's basically it. If you guys like have any questions or thoughts or feedback, like find me. I'll be around here. I think the biggest thing I'd probably remind you of that I talked about today is like the dynamic chain registry fetcher and the new use contracts hooks. I think that's going to be a game changer for the Cosmos development. So thank you guys, and appreciate you listening and being here. Hope you build some cool stuff.